Adding, subtracting, and multiplying complex numbers. To add, subtract, and multiply complex numbers, we will use the same techniques as we use when we work with polynomials. However, where we have an I squared, we need to remember to change that to a -1. The reason behind this is because we know that I equals the square root of -1, so I squared equals the square root of -1 squared, or the square root of -1 times the square root of -1, which is equal to -1. So that's why we just change I squared to -1 and then simplify as far as we can. So let's do a couple examples here. So for addition, we have 3 plus 12i squared plus 15 plus 6i squared. So since we're adding everything together, we can essentially just get rid of the parentheses and write it as 3 plus 12i squared plus 15 plus 6i squared. And then we combine our like terms, our 3 and our 15. That's the real part of our complex number, so that goes first. So that would be 3 plus 15 is 18. And then 12i squared plus 6i squared is going to be plus 18i squared. But if you remember, we said we always change the I squared to a -1. So we have 18 plus 18 times -1. 18 times -1 is -18. So our answer is 0. Our simplified form is just 0. For the next example here, we have 4 plus 6i minus 2 plus 3i. So in this one, the first step we need to do is to get rid of the parentheses is distribute in your negative sign. So that would be 4 plus 6i minus 2 minus 3i. And then I combine my like terms. 4 and -2 is 2. Positive 6 minus 3 is a positive 3i. And that's your final answer. For these next two examples, we're going to try multiplying the complex numbers. In this first one, all we have to do is the distribution. So it's not as difficult. When we distribute, what we get would be 4i times 10, which is going to be 40i. And 4i times 12i is going to be 48. And then I times I is I squared. So then we have to simplify. We have 40i plus 48 times -1, which is obviously going to be a -48. So 40i plus -48. But we need to write it in its correct form, where it's real part first and then the imaginary part. So that would be -48 plus 40i. And that's your final answer. And the last one, this one, two complex numbers that have both a real part and an imaginary part. So we have to actually FOIL it out. So first, outside, inside, last, giving me 4 times 3, which is 12, plus 4 times 2, which is 8. I. 5 times 3, 5i times 3 is a 15i, and then 5i times 2i is 10i squared. Now I simplify, so that would be the 12 plus 8i plus 15i is 23i, plus 10, I see an I squared right there, so I'm going to just change that to -1. 12 plus 23i minus 10. Now I put my 10 and my 12 together. So that makes it 12 minus 10, which is 2, plus 23i. And that is your final answer. Make sure you always write it real part, then imaginary part. Those are your notes over adding, subtracting, and multiplying complex numbers. Go through the practice problems. Make sure you can do all of them. The multiplication is usually a little bit more difficult. And then you can take your quiz.